Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hello and welcome to this week's episode of Zoom for Thought in Conversation strand. And I'm very pleased to welcome as my guest this week, Libby Burgess, pianist, accompanist, vocal coach, and the artistic director of the New Paths Music Festival. For those of you who've been following the series, you'll know that this is an opportunity to talk to luminaries in the world of music and the world of the arts, talking about how the arts world has been coping in the past year with all the myriad difficulties and challenges posed by coronavirus, but also looking at some of the creative solutions to the problems, some of the ways around it, some of the new artistic opportunities that have arisen, and some of the opportunities that might be taken forward going on after life hopefully returns to normal later on this year. So I'm very grateful to Libby for taking the opportunity and the time to join me in the virtual studio. So please welcome into the studio pianist Libby. Libby, welcome.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me here.
A pleasure. How's life with you? Are you well?
Yeah, all right. Thank you. It's a strangely quiet winter that it's been, but yeah, doing all right. And certainly feeling buoyed after the government's announcements last week to have a sense that there's some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's provisional. I think that and the daffodils coming through definitely help the mood.
That's right. Or maybe all announcements should be sort of, aligned with daffodils starting to bloom, just for the sort of, uplifting, morale boosting sense that it imparts.
Definitely. I think a lot of people have found this winter lockdown harder than the one last spring for exactly that reason, sort of no new plants coming through, short days, all of that. So I think we're all very ready for spring and summer.
Absolutely. The light at the end of the tunnel can't come soon enough. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's been missing, hasn't it? It's that sense that all throughout last year, we weren't really able to plan and to look ahead and to start producing and putting things in place because we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But now with the roadmap and the route out of this having been announced, finally there's hopefully the opportunity to start putting things in place as we emerge later on in the year. Is that, with your festival director hat on as the New Paths director, how is that something that you found? How was it last year and what's the difference this year?
Well, last year was really strange for us because our spring festival is normally just around Easter time. And so pretty much this week last year, we were all starting to hear more about COVID in the news and cases where we were aware of cases in this country, and I can really remember the timeline to pretty much the hour of that week last year where we were having to weigh up whether or not to go ahead with the festival. We were meant to be early April, and looking back now, there's no way we could have gone ahead, and we're all now so used to things being cancelled that it's inconceivable that festival would ever have happened. But in March, the idea of cancelling anything at a few weeks' notice, let alone a whole festival, was unimaginable, and these festivals have a long run-in period in terms of the planning, artistically and logistically, financially, and it was completely unimaginable that it would not go ahead. And so we were watching those early government announcements very closely, and there was a stage when we thought we would be able to go ahead because our audiences were in the hundreds rather than the thousands, and it looked like that might still be possible. Mm-hmm. And then quite quickly the mood turned, and we suddenly realized that it just wasn't going to happen. And so we actually compared notes with a couple of other festival directors in other parts of the country who were obviously making the same decisions, and called an emergency trustee meeting, which I remember having from the Station Cafe in Norwich, because that's where I was that day, because in those days I was still sort of working and being in different places. We all dialed in from wherever we were and talked it all through and realized that actually it simply couldn't happen. And so I think it was the 13th of March last year that we cancelled the festival at less than 3 weeks' notice. And it was really strange doing it at that point, because obviously so close to an event, you've practiced all of the music, you've rehearsed with people, you've written the program notes, you've created the seating plans for the audience, it really, everything is up and running. And festivals are a real adrenaline rush when they happen. But it was very strange having that sprint towards the finish line and then suddenly sort of falling off the edge of a cliff, and never getting to bring to fruition all of the things that we've been preparing. It was very weird and quite a difficult way to start the whole lockdown period. There have been lots of cancellations, obviously, since then that have been hard and sad, but that one was particularly tough because of the timing of it. But having said that, I think I've never been so aware of how well supported we are by our audience as in the wake of that cancellation. And I mean, our audience are wonderful. They're so lovely. And the performers who come up and play for us always comment on the sort of warm northern welcome that they get. But we were really made aware of how appreciative people are of what we do. People were so generous in donating back their ticket money for, tickets that they bought for the festival that wasn't going to happen, and giving us other donations, and just taking the time to write to us and say, we love what you do and we'll be there when we all emerge from this at the other end. And that was really amazing. So actually we were very supported through that, although it was a strange process. So I suppose then your question, how it feels this year, we have been holding off on planning for this year because the danger, I think, is that you end up planning 10 different versions of how something might be, kind of anticipating every different scenario. And then actually by default, at least 9 of those are going to be versions that don't happen. And probably all 10 of them, you have to come up with something different again. And so we've been sort of sitting tight and just waiting to see what happens. And we are now looking at putting something on in the summer with live audience and hopefully, reasonable capacity. I'm sure there are likely still to be restrictions, but a decent number of people, and that incredible feeling of sharing live music in the same place. So yeah, we're finally, since the announcements last week, able to start putting things in place, which feels wonderful.
And it must be really nice to have had that feedback from your festival audience, that actually they were aware of what you were going through. Because the difficulty is, isn't it, that festivals cancelling and venues closing their doors, there's the sense that, okay, nothing is going on, but actually frantically things are going on behind closed doors, aren't they, to regroup and replan and redress and work out how you can make things happen. So it must have been quite reassuring for all that you were able to bring your festival to the audience, the fact that the audience were actually getting in touch with you to say, we will still be here when we re-emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's such a fear when organisations aren't able to see their audience and produce their product. There's a real fear that the organisation will sort of disappear off the radar, and people have been very concerned about sort of maintaining traction, I think. And it does feel good to be reassured that people are still planning to come to things and that they haven't forgotten about us. But actually, if anything, I think it's the opposite. I think audiences are dying to hear live music every bit as much as performers are dying to play and sing it. And we actually managed to put a few live concerts on right at the end of October between different lockdowns with live audience, and they sold out within about 48 hours. Obviously, that was a very reduced capacity to allow for distancing, but we were slightly unsure when we floated the idea of whether audience might be nervous about coming, and actually we could have sold far more tickets, had we been able to have more people in the building. So I think there is a real appetite for music. Music's so fundamental to human existence as far as I'm concerned, and I think that doesn't go away. If anything, there's more appetite for it, given that people have been starved of it for so long.
And did you go down the sort of the digital online platform engagement when things were in abeyance throughout last year? Because I know a lot of festivals and so on moved things online in order to still provide content for their audiences. Was that something that you did? Well,
with the April festival last year, it was too soon to be able to do that. People barely knew about what a lockdown was at that point. So that we just had to cancel. And I'm proud that we did that in a good way and managed to pay our musicians a cancellation fee and managed to have all this lovely correspondence with our audience and things like that. But that was definitely a cancellation. There was no sense at that point that we could stream it instead. And as you say, gradually the arts world has caught up with what is possible technologically, and I think that was a catch up that was always going to happen, but the COVID has been the catalyst for that happening so quickly. And so we haven't actually streamed concerts, but we commissioned a series of short films called Postcards, which we put out through the end of the summer and the early autumn last year, and they are one piece of music each, so they're shorts, if you like, 6, 7, 8 minutes each, and each one is inspired by the place of Beverley where New Paths happens, in different ways. So looking at elements of the history of the place or the architecture of the place, and picking a piece that is inspired in some way by that. So it's sort of a sense that they are really a musical postcard from the place. So we got 3 other musicians as well as me up to Beverley during the summer when Beverley Minster was closed to the public, and so we were able to use the space, and we're very grateful to the Minster for letting us do that, because it's the most beautiful building. Mm-hmm. And unless people know Beverley, they generally haven't seen it. I didn't know it until I met Roland, who's my other half, who I run the festival with, and he always talked about having been a chorister in this amazing building, and I sort of thought he was exaggerating, and then I came and saw it for the first time and I couldn't believe it. It's really stunning. It puts many cathedrals to shame, and so it was incredible to be in there and making music in there, and for me that was the first time that I'd made music with other people for months. It was the very end of July, beginning of August, and I hadn't done anything since early March, and so it was quite intense, but a really special thing to be able to do. And like everybody else, we had to battle through working out whether we would put those out for free or whether we could monetize them. And actually, we were lucky to be able to put them out for free and ask for donations. And they've really brought New Paths to a new audience, as well as being a sort of nice way to reconnect with our existing audience. The great thing of being able to put material out online is that it can reach all corners of the country and beyond. And that's been a really lovely thing.
That's right. I mean, the in some ways, although you lose out, don't you, by you lose the audience engagement and the live experience of the arts, actually being able to put events online in some form increases the accessibility, doesn't it, for people who either aren't geographically near or who for various reasons are unable to get there in person. It means that you're able to provide content to people whom you might otherwise not have been able to reach with your live kind of events, which that must be quite reassuring in some ways. Is that something that you would look to develop after, when we return back to normal?
Definitely. I mean, I'd love to create another series of the postcards. We've got creative ideas for how that might work. So that's one possibility. Lots of places have obviously been streaming whole concerts as well. I have to say, I think it's very difficult to put on a concert that works well with a live audience and streaming, unless you're very well set up technologically, because I think either you have so much tech in the way that it mars the audience experience in the building, or you make the tech very discreet and minimal, and actually then perhaps the sound and the picture are not so interesting. I think the Oxford Leader Festival has done an amazing job of their live streams recently. They did a big festival in the autumn and then a small one just this last weekend. And I loved watching those because they really captured the experience of being in the room as an audience member. The picture was such high quality, the sound was amazing, and there were lots of different camera angles. You felt the sort of ambience of the room. But they didn't have a live audience, of course, because you can't at the moment. And so then you can go all out on making it work for film. So I think it is a challenge for places to make things work well, both live and streamed at the same time. But it's definitely a possibility. And I think everyone will keep getting better at it as well with more practice. Very few places were doing this other than, the proms being on TV. There was very little of this kind of process going on until just a year ago. So I think, it will keep developing and people will keep getting better at it. So yeah, in the right context, I'd love to look at doing that and being able to extend our audience in that way as well.
Because certainly from my point of view, I don't feel as though I've done so much technology-based continuing professional development in my life as I have since March. It's probably the same for you. You know, the sense that we're practicing and performing musicians, but suddenly we've had to equip ourselves with a wide array of technology-based skills and understanding and so on in so short a time in order to be able to continue what we're doing. That I think it's been quite strange. I mean, quite exciting in some ways, but yes, it's been quite unusual to have to be so adept at picking up technological things so quickly in a way that we wouldn't normally have been expected to do as part of our day-to-day lives as musicians.
Yeah, and I think that that change has happened and it's not going to be reversed. And there are lots of benefits to that. You know, there's lots of teaching that's been going on over Zoom and Teams and things like that. And it's always preferable to be able to teach in the same room. But sometimes if teachers are traveling around, performing, needing to be somewhere else, the fact they can now very easily Zoom in a day's lessons from wherever they happen to be that day, sometimes it is a great benefit. And similarly with all the things we were talking about with streaming and so on, yeah, we've all had to pick up a lot very quickly, but hopefully the good bits of that we'll keep getting better at. But certainly when I was a student, I didn't get any training on anything technological. I did my undergrad at university and my postgrad at music college, and neither of those did I don't think I learned anything about anything technological. And you know, technology has changed quite a lot since then, but it's not a million years ago. And I think now that surely is going to change. Already undergrads that I'm working with are so much more tech savvy and adept at sending in recordings of things and multi-tracking things and creating click tracks for things and all this stuff that has been part of our lockdown experience. And I imagine, therefore, that is going quite quickly to become part of their training, and rightly so, because it opens up so many options for us as musicians.
Because we were saying just before we came on air that's one of the avenues that you've pursued since last March, isn't it? You've actually set up a vocal coaching practice online. How has that been in terms of related to the as you were saying, you know, compared to the in-person experience? What are some of the challenges that you found and some of the solutions to working online in that way?
Well, one of the things that I love doing is working with voices, and that is sometimes as a pianist and sometimes as a coach, and there's quite an overlap between those two roles anyway. And so it did take a bit of adapting to not being in the same room, because there are so many small signals that you pick up from somebody in the same room, you know, even just in conversation in terms of body language and so on, but with a singer in terms of their breath and how they're standing and tiny nuances of what they're doing that you respond to in the moment as a coach or a sort of collaborative partner. And it did take a while to work out how that could happen, but actually there's so much work that you can still do online, and it's not the same thing and it's not as good, but it can be very good. And so I set up this series of workshops called Songworks, and just put the word out amongst people that I know, and have ended up doing a session not quite every week for the last 6 months, but quite a number of sessions now. And the participants are ranging from undergrads at music college as singers to established professionals who are missing the chance of working with people in a normal way. And we've had some dedicated amateurs taking part as well. It's a real range of different kind of levels of experience, but actually there's been loads of good work we can do. And so people have just been making a small video of their own performance kind of in their living room, and they send it to me, and then I play those in the Zoom session, and we just have a discussion. And sometimes people then actually sing in the session and try out different things, but a lot of it has been discussion based, talking about approaches to the song, talking about language issues, which you can do very well over a medium like this, and talking about ways of approaching poetry and what the song is really getting at. And it's been a lovely way of people expanding their own repertoire as well. You know, the different singers in the group have picked up repertoire ideas from each other, and I've learned some new repertoire from it. Some people have brought songs that I didn't know before. So it's been a really lovely thing to do, and to be able to keep working with singers that I coach normally in that way, but also to be able to meet new singers through it who I've still not ever met in real life, but have perhaps coached through Zoom, you know, quite a number of times now. So that's been a lovely thing. And hopefully, as we all emerge from this, elements of that we can keep using in that way, and we might be able to balance it with doing some work in person as well.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? As creative individuals, we're used to finding ways round and adjusting and adapting and so on. And we've had to do that, you know, in a very technology-based skill shift over the past year. But actually, it's been reassuring to be able to keep working, and teaching and learning doesn't stop simply because we've been forced to do it online, and in some ways find new ways and new things to do. And it's been reassuring that teaching has benefited from all the skills that creative people bring, and the challenge of, right, it's not been a case of, right, this can't happen, so we'll stop doing it. The artistic community and the creative sector have gone, right, how can we make this work? And for me, I think some of the best discussions I've had this past year have been with people who've come with the approach of, how can we make this work? What can we do now to keep going, rather than just going, oh, well, nothing can happen, so we'll completely stop everything we do.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's really, that's why teaching creativity in schools is so important. And, you know, these days there are so many traditional jobs that are being taken over by computers, or will, you know, in the coming years and decades be taken over by computers. But surely the one thing that as humans sets us apart from computers is creativity. And actually that's going to be probably more needed than ever, creative thinking as a sort of way of approaching things. It's not so much sort of developing the specific skill of playing an instrument, or, you know, handling a paintbrush or whatever it might be, but it's that whole way of thinking, isn't it? And I know there's been some amazing research done in recent years into teaching creativity, and just how transformative it is for young children. So I'm a passionate believer that is something that needs to stay a priority. And as you say, it's really interesting that the creative industries have been so badly hit by the pandemic, and so many individuals have been so badly hit, but actually the response has by and large been amazingly creative, and that's because those individuals have that sort of that way of thinking. So yeah, it really shows the importance of it, I think.
And how, when you were, you know, going through all the cancellations and the readjusting of because you're also a co-artistic director of the Beverley Chamber Music Festival as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The Beverley Chamber Music Festival has been running for much longer, but was recently taken over by New Paths because their old management had reached a point where they wanted to step down and hand it on to somebody else. And so, New Paths now runs both of those festivals. And Martin Roscoe and I are co-artistic directors of the Beverley Chamber Music Festival.
And how have you found the response has been from the artists, as you know, working with both festivals, if you like, in terms of their response to the cancellations and the ways that you've been asking them to do or not do, or do things differently? Has their response generally been equally as positive about making things work and finding new ways to make things happen?
Yeah, I think we are really lucky that our artists by and large love coming and performing at New Paths, and we do, and that applies for the Chamber Music Festival as well. And we do work them very hard, and we often ask them to give a ridiculous number of concerts across a very few days, but that intensity is what makes a festival so special, I think. And they have a lot of fun while they're up. There are all sorts of brilliant party stories from our festivals past, and so I think they have also been very supportive. But it's been an awful time for freelancers, and what has been really tough as organizations have tried to get things going again is the never quite knowing. And so people are spending weeks, months preparing bits of music, learning new chamber pieces or solo works, or preparing a whole opera roll from scratch, and then finding that the whole project is cancelled at quite short notice because lockdown restrictions change in different places. And that is emotionally exhausting. And I think it's been a real test of resilience for a lot of people. And I know certainly I find at the moment there are days when I'm just completely exhausted and good for nothing, and I can't work out why. I think, well, I haven't done anything, and actually we've all had a lot emotionally to handle in the last year, and that takes its toll on the body. And I think maybe we're all learning to be a bit kinder to ourselves with that as well. I certainly look back at my old diary and think, how the hell did I run around, that many places in that few days? And I think maybe it's important to give ourselves the space to be exhausted if that's where we are at the moment. I think our artists have been amazing, but I'm really conscious it's an awful time for them. And so I hope that one of the things that comes out of this whole situation is an improved way of engaging freelancers on the part of promoters, because contracts have often been worth no more than the piece of paper that they're written on. And certainly in that first wave of cancellations last spring, for understandable reasons, many promoters and venues were waving the force majeure clause around and saying we don't owe the artists a penny. And by the law of the contract, that might be true, but it's freelancers have mortgages to pay and all the rest of it. And I think that hopefully is gradually going to change. I know that at the moment, many more contracts that are starting to come in for people have got an inbuilt cancellation fee structure that never used to really be there. And for example, opera singer friends of mine who would previously have rehearsed for 6 weeks unpaid, but then got a nice fee for each show that ultimately kind of paid for the whole patch. There were so many people caught out by that where projects were cancelled after 5 weeks of rehearsal and they didn't get a penny. And that's completely inexcusable. And I think now that everyone's learned the hard way what a danger that can be, I think those contracts are going to be created in different ways, and people will be paid properly for rehearsal time, because that's their time and their expertise and their commitment. I hope that that's another positive that comes out of all this.
Because it's not just the finished product, isn't it? I think that I think I've said before that there's, in some ways, we're the victims of our own success, in that we don't present anything as creative musicians and performers and so on until it's ready. So the audience's artistic experience is right at the end, when we've prepared the production or we've rehearsed and it's the time for the performance. And so they don't see all the practice and the work and the rehearsals that goes on behind closed doors, because that's not what we're about. We're not about sharing the formative process, are we? It's simply the excellence and the value of the finished product. And in some ways, this year has been more about appreciating, as you say, the 5 or 6 weeks rehearsal leading up to something, and actually recognizing that is a part of the creation of the finished product, rather than just the end show that people go and watch.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lovely cartoon that I've seen that is a picture of an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg, above the water level, is the performance, and all of that other stuff underneath is the bit that audiences often don't know about or think about. And maybe that had started to change already, actually, with the age of social media, where artists share more of that backstory and share clips from rehearsals, or a selfie of themselves on the station platform with a coffee on their way to whatever it is. Maybe that sort of barrier had already started to be broken down in a way that I think is really healthy. Again, I think that will have changed quite a lot now, with so many people streaming performances, recorded on their phone from their living room. I've done a bit of that, and there's that barrier has shifted. But I tell you, I've never been so grateful for the professional tech people as in trying to do home live streams. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I think maybe some recording engineers worried they were going to be out of a job. And I think categorically no one has ever appreciated them more.
No, that's right. And I've tried to make a thing over the past year of not hiding the nature of working and rehearsing and performing from home, or trying to record and present material that you've had to film behind closed doors. I think in some ways it's been important to not hide the the cabling, or some of the technology. I don't mind sometimes if that's in shot, because it reassures you that people are doing their very best to carry on engaging and presenting performances and providing content for listeners to experience. And I don't mind seeing a little bit of the jerry-rigged homemade aspect to it sometimes, because it makes me appreciate the efforts that people are going to all the more.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you said that as performers we tend to sort of wait until we've got the finished product before we share it, and actually I think it's the most brilliant moments of connection between performer and audience are often the most human moments of connection, when the performer is sort of taken off a pedestal and actually we realize that we're all just sharing in the same emotional response to this music, and it might just be one or two people on the stage playing it, but the audience's response to it is every bit as valuable. And actually performers aren't perfect, and music is never a finished product anyway. And that's, I suppose, something we have to make peace with as musicians, that there is never a perfect version of anything, but that it is something that lives in the moment, and that's what distinguishes it from other art forms, I suppose.
And in some ways, turning everything into recorded or online performances actually defeats that transitory moment of connection, because suddenly it's captured, and any fluffs or mistakes, you're condemned to have to sort of stand by those, because they've been captured and presented digitally. And you, as a live performer, I'm sure you understand the idea of risk taking, and there are times when you feel you can take risks with a live audience, because the temperature of the gig is just encouraging you to push a little bit more, or the musician that you're working with does something and you think, oh, that's interesting, I'll follow where they're going, and you push together. And actually performers can perhaps be made to feel more reluctant to take those risks because they know it's being recorded. Absolutely,
definitely. And that live atmosphere with an audience in a room is something that I've missed so deeply. And I know that's true for so many people. But the thing of risk taking is really important, I think. And I would much rather hear a performance that is, full of risk and energy and excitement and has some wrong notes in it. And I think that's true of almost every concert goer. And yet, as performers, it's so easy to forget that and get stuck in the mindset of having to get it right, and particularly so when it's being broadcast. And in the old world, pre-pandemic, it used to be that if a concert was being broadcast live, the fee would hopefully increase to reflect that. And now suddenly everyone's putting out streams of themselves for free, which are the most stressful thing, and record your every error. And I've been doing that as well, and I'm running a crazy Bach project next year, and I've done a couple of this year, and I've done a couple of informal live streams from home, from my piano right here. And aside from the tech stresses of it, it's musically really stressful doing stuff from home, where you're having breakfast 1 minute and then suddenly you're sitting at your piano and playing to the wide world. And it's very difficult to take risks in that, and also not to panic about your mistakes being preserved for posterity. And I worry for young musicians so much in this social media era. There's so much good that comes from social media and sharing experiences and music and all the rest of it, but it is tough having your every mistake preserved. And as musicians, we have to feel that we can make mistakes. But I was watching on YouTube yesterday. I've been stuck in a bit of an internet wormhole in the last few days, watching amazing actors speaking amazing words. I was talking to some singers at Cheatham's. I was doing some online workshops for them, and we were talking about song being the meeting of text and music, and that it's equally important to watch actors handling text as it is to watch instrumentalists handling music. And as a result, I got stuck down an internet wormhole watching Ian McKellen reading all sorts of amazing text, and mostly it's incredibly fluent. But the most moving example that I found was him reading Michael Tolliver's coming out letter from Tales of the City. And he stumbles because it's emotionally so resonant for him. He stumbles on his words so many times, and it is the most powerful example there is. And it really made me think, gosh, as musicians, that's so true as well, isn't it? What's the odd wrong note if actually what you're saying has got soul?
Yes, and if you've connected with it to the point where it affects you at the moment of delivery, hopefully that's something that the audience will recognise and perceive, won't they?
Definitely, and actually in the vocal coaching I've been doing, that's been a huge part of what we've been looking at, is exactly that, stepping into the shoes of the character, and it's all a big empathy exercise really. But if the music is real to you, and the story and the narrative and the experience of the music is real to you, the audience sees that. They don't necessarily know what's in your head, but they see that it's real to you, and then it becomes real to them.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the project that's coming this year, is this the Project48 that you mentioned? Tell us a little bit more about that, because that sounds fantastic, but it sounds also slightly alarming for reasons that will become clear. What have you lined up for that?
It's completely ridiculous. I am playing the whole of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, which is known as the 48. And I was, a few years ago, starting to dream up this project, and I don't know what possessed me, but I Googled on a train whilst doing some emails, how many counties are there in England? And I found that there are 48. And I just thought, right, well, there's a project here that has to happen. And in fact, I couldn't believe that the project hadn't already happened. I sort of was Googling around to try and make sure no one else had already had the idea, but I couldn't see that they had. And so I am going to play the whole of the 48 in each of England's 48 counties this year. And that is partly a musical Everest project. I want to do it because it's there, and a real challenge, but also it's a fundraiser for musical charities, and there are any number of worthy contenders, but the four that I'm supporting are Help Musicians, Live Music Now, Youth Music, and Future Talent, who all do amazing work. But I picked them particularly because Bach's own introduction to Book 1 of the 48 talks about the music being sort of for development and study for students and young musicians, but also for enjoyment of those who are already experienced in the art. So I wanted to reflect that and pick charities that work particularly with young musicians, and then Help Musicians, which works with supporting a lot of professional musicians, and Live Music Now, which creates performance opportunities for young professionals, but also takes music to all sorts of contexts, hospitals and care homes and so on, sort of for the joy of music. So I was specifically trying to reflect Bach's own comments in some way with that selection. So once live performance is allowed, I'm going to be playing it 48 times, in theory, before the end of 2021, unless a subsequent lockdown just makes that completely impossible. The plan is still to do it all during this calendar year.
And as a pianist, we're both used to turning up and playing on the piano at the venue and being wholly reliant. We're not like a violinist or a flautist who takes their own lovely instrument that they're perfectly attuned to and have practiced for hours on with us. We are entirely dependent on the nature of the instrument that we're given when we are there. And I find it really alarming at the prospect of not quite knowing what the instrument and how reliable it was going to be. Have you managed to inbuild some kind of mechanism into the project to make sure that you're given a piano that you can at least play the 48 Preludes and Fugues on, and do it justice?
Well, some of the venues that I'll be playing in, I know already, and I've played there before, and so there I sort of know what I'll be facing. Right. I've set up in each county a relationship with somebody who's going to be organising the event and making it happen and ensuring that it raises some funds for the charities. And so what I've said to them is that the piano needs to be good enough to do the music justice. And given the sort of bonkers nature of the project, I don't feel that I can be precious about the pianos. And actually, I enjoy playing different instruments anyway, and finding the quirks of different pianos. But I have said that the piano needs to sort of be able to serve the music. And the exception to that, I've said I'm really happy to use a completely terrible piano if there's a really good reason for doing so. So, for example, if it's a visit to a primary school and they have a piano in the hall and it's in a terrible state, but they want to have some Bach, they're completely up for that. If there's a prison visit, or if it's the only way we can get a piano to the top of a mountain or anything like that, then then I'm happy to play whatever we can make work.
It's because it's, I guess, the someone like Ashkenazi, who had his own Steinway travelled around with him and so on. I guess that's not something that you can necessarily factor into your project, taking a lovely piano around the country with you.
Absolutely no way. It wouldn't raise any money at all that way. But I do also enjoy playing different pianos. And it's been a weird thing actually in the last year that 98% of my playing has all been on my piano here at home. And I've had a few pieces of work in the gaps between lockdown, and I'm very grateful for those, but there haven't been that many things. And so, ordinarily I would play, gosh, I don't know, 10 different pianos in a week potentially sometimes. And, and I've probably not played 10 pianos in the last year. So it's a really strange thing. And I hope that I haven't lost that ability to adapt to new instruments when I do meet them. But if I have, 48 different counties of Bach will soon sort that out.
And when does the project begin then? Well, all things being equal.
Well, the government roadmap says that live performance can start from the 17th of May. So just sort of trying to pin down dates more closely in the light of that roadmap. But pretty quickly after that, doing 48 complete performances of the 48 in a year is quite a challenge, but we'll have lost 5.5 months at the beginning of the year, best case scenario. So it's going to be really intensely crammed in. So yeah, hopefully before the end of May.
Fantastic. And are you allowed to tell us where it starts yet, or do we need to wait for a grand unveiling?
There isn't any official information about that yet, and that is because it's not 100% confirmed.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Until we had that roadmap, there was very little point sort of trying to pin down dates with places. So I know there are sort of a couple of contenders of where it's likely to be that first performance, but it will all be on the project website, which is bachproject48.co.uk, shameless plug, and on the social media for it as well. So yeah, hopefully that first batch of dates will be announced quite soon now.
Fantastic. Because obviously, yeah, I mean, what we were saying earlier about part of the problem last year has been the inability to sort of, project forward and put all these things in place. And actually, this sounds like it's actually able to benefit from the sort of the gradual return to normal and the resumption of things. It must be quite nice to have a project that you can see unfurling ahead of you in line with the sort of restrictions being lifted and so on. That must be quite reassuring and a rare moment of positivity in these times.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's wonderful to have a big project to focus on, and musically there's so much in it to live with. And I think there are lots of pieces that I couldn't play 48 times without going around the bend, but this music, you can live with it for a lifetime and not discover everything that's in it. It's so intricate and so rich, and there's a great deal to explore. So I'm really looking forward to living with it so much, and I have already been, in the last 6 months or so since I announced the project was definitely going ahead. And I suppose in the light of everything in the last year, venues and organisers have become much more willing to consider putting things on at short notice, because that's the only way any of us have been able to do anything. And so previously, trying to organise concerts at just a few months' notice would be a very rare occurrence. And people's diaries, performers and audience and venues would all be full months, if not years ahead. And that has changed. And so actually we can be quite nimble in responding to deadlines and timescales and make things happen when we can. And so, yeah, in that way, it's quite well timed, but it's quite a jigsaw puzzle putting it all together.
Yes, that's right. 48 regions trying to line up. I mean, that's a tour, isn't it? What you've effectively done is created a nationwide tour with just over 6 months, or no, just over 5 months in order to pack it all in. But I'm sure it will work out. It sounds wonderfully creative, both musically and geographically, because presumably you'll end up playing in all manner of different venues, in all manner of different sort of areas and so on. Regionally, it must be that the contrast will come presumably from the different places in which you end up playing. Yeah,
and I'm actively trying to make sure that the venues in different counties feel different, have a different atmosphere, and the sort of nature of the performance is different. And so hopefully, you know, a theatre that's a black box and has no windows and has lighting potentials will always feel different from a modern concert hall like the beautiful one you've got in Canterbury, and then, you know, that will feel different again from a sort of medieval church building. And I hope that all of these will have a different feel, but also the format will be different. So it's about 4 hours of music, and so that means in some counties that will be 2 consecutive evening concerts in a sort of relatively traditional format, but in some places I'm breaking the music up in other ways and combining it into different sets. And so I might be doing 4 concerts that are about an hour each, spread through the day, you know, a coffee concert, a lunch concert, an afternoon concert, an evening concert, or in the 1 or 2 cities where it might be that I'm doing a trail around quite a number of different venues, probably not quite as many as 48 different venues, but, you know, 12 perhaps, and doing 20 minutes in each place. So there are lots of mathematical possibilities, but also kind of programming possibilities in terms of combining the music in different ways. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that changes how individual preludes and fugues within the collection feel, depending on what they're surrounded by, their context. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And what we must make sure is that when the project is finished, is that we catch up again and talk to you about the experience of exactly that. You know, not only what the journey was like geographically, but also how your relationship to the music has evolved through doing it so many times in all these different places. We'll have to arrange a date to have an in conversation after the project, so we can catch up with your kind of reflections on it and your experiences of doing the project.
Yeah, I've never played any piece probably as many times as that altogether, but certainly in such a short space of time. And I'm really interested to see what happens with that and how it evolves. And I don't think it's going to be a sort of linear progression. It's not as though I'm starting with my interpretation now and I'll have the perfect interpretation by the end. You know, I think more it's a living, moving thing, and it will always feel different in different buildings and on different days and in different orders and all of that. And so it will be really interesting to see how that all works. And I'm hoping to sort of record that. I'm going to record technologically some of the elements of performances in different places, but also trying to sort of write and note my own interaction with the music as the project progresses.
Fantastic. And obviously you'll have to make a point of letting us know when you reach the region of Kent. So
I will do that.
We can make sure that we turn out and listen to I don't suppose you'll know which part of how far into the journey you'll be at that point, but it will be interesting to come and hear it. I mean, I'm quite excited at the sort of the programming opportunities that your project, you know, one of the things I admire about what you do with New Paths in particular is that new approach to programming and the innovation and the creativity that goes with presenting not just, you know, traditional music and you know, stuff that's well known like the Bach, but also new pieces and the dialogue between the old and new and something. So that sounds like a fantastic project. Looking forward to seeing how that unfolds.
Thank you. And that's such an interesting comment on programming, because I think as an industry, we have been a little bit stuck in our ways with programming, and actually there are so many, we don't need gimmicks, but we just need to think about our ways of presenting music. And I love it when you go to the theatre and the curtain comes up and you're hooked and you're in the show right until the very end. You get picked up and you don't get put down until the end. And I think as concert goers, we often don't have that experience. There's often a lot of faff with music stands and coming on and coming off and, you know, reorganizing music and all of that stuff, which just sort of the energy drops somehow. And I think I love it when people are creative about that. And in fact, the times I've been down and played at the Collier Ferguson with Cantia Quorum have been a joy, because they are so brilliant at exactly that, and putting together interesting programs and really thinking about the audience's journey from beginning to end. So yeah, I love it when that works.
Fantastic. Well, Libby, thank you very much indeed for being a very generous and a very appreciative guest to have on the episode this week. It's been fantastic and exciting to hear about Project 48, and best of luck with that. We look forward to catching up with you when it's finished.
Thank you.
So thank you very much to my guest this week, Libby, and thank you to everyone for watching along. We'll be back again in a few weeks' time. But from me, Dan Harding, thank you very much for watching.